Alright, how about now? Can you
check.
hear now?
Let me check. That line. Live now. Oh, yep, I hear.
Great.
Awesome.
Okay. So now that we've gotten over the technical difficulties, we can go and open up Mr. Stutz's answer in a different tab. A gifted kid burnout.
Yes.
I love how you start. Yep.
Oh, I was just picturing when you're like gifted kid burnout. I'm just thinking of some smart guy in a car, like going around to
drop the clutch.
Holy crap! Oh yeah. Okay. One sec.
Really, it's like the parent should take the keys to his car.
Yeah, I was thinking. Yeah, I'm just thinking like the way could you like gifted kid burnout? It's like some.
It's like you have your car and you name it Gifted Kid, and
it
doesn't have traction control.
Just god, holy shit. Anyway, yeah. So let's see. So my answer is, I'll just read it. I think that it's the result of shitty. So it says, what do you think about the term gifted kid burnout? I think that it's the result of shitty parenting. If your kid is talented in a certain way, you cultivate that talent carefully. If you're trying to grow something, let's say a nice tall sunflower, what do? Water it intermittently, give it a healthy exposure to sunlight, and make sure the soil is filled with nutrients. What you don't do is douse it with a fire hose, nuke it with gamma rays, and plant it in sand. Things and people will grow up on their own and need someone to help guide the wheel at times, not to stomp on the gas. God, the car analogy. These
you were thinking burnout.
I wasn't even. Yeah, I hadn't made that connection at that point. These parents drive gifted children to maximize their talents in the most unhealthy way possible. This isn't sustainable, and the kids burn out. The kids also often get the idea that their worth is predicated on the talent that their parents seem to value so highly and develop shitty self-esteems. I think what happens more often than that, though, is gifted kid extinguished. Of the most gifted people that I've encountered, the ones who are mainstreamed at grade level seem to have the most problems. Oftentimes, they didn't even realize that they were gifted and rather thought themselves weird and aberrant. These kids accrue worse and worse habits over time as they are perpetually under-challenged, understimulated, and devoid of peers. It's like the human body. What happens to a muscle when it isn't challenged? It atrophies. If we think of the brain like a muscle, it's equivalent to lifting a 1-pound weight for 12 years of your life. Would you expect gains? No, obviously not. Someone would be relying on their innate strength. Games, bro. No, obviously not. Someone would be relying on their innate strength in life then, uncultivated by the system they reside in. Traits like perseverance, patience, ability to plan, etc. would go by the wayside. When I think about my friends in real life and I, who have IQs north of 150 and were mainstreamed, our etiquette in school was/is simply atrocious. I personally slept through most of my classes or looked at my phone, acing tests and getting zeros on homework. In elementary school, I acted out and got in trouble all the time. If you can already read as well as a fifth grader, add 3-digit numbers, do exponents, calculate area, and understand integrals, why would you want to learn how to count from 1 to 10? I became restless, aggressive, disengaged, and I acted out, often getting sent to the principal's office. I have numerous emails from my elementary school teachers to my mom. They said that I seemed to lack remorse when I misbehaved, and that I was pugnacious, recalcitrant, and off in the clouds, or student land, as they termed it. If a rule seemed stupid to me, I disregarded it. Everything had to make logical sense to me, or it was wrong. My mom reported back that I was a delightful child when out of school, adventurous, curious, artistic, empathetic, albeit a bit intense and also sensitive. It seems like school made me a different person. My friends and I became more and more disillusioned with school as time went on, and this peaked in high school. Many of us resorted to various street drugs and alcohol as both a social lubricant and source of stimulation. It was often literally high school for us. One of my friends like this slacked off and was considered a stoner for the first 2 years of high school. He got middling grades and generally didn't apply himself. On a whim, the last 2 years, he loaded up with AP classes and got nearly all fives on around 17 tests. He is now going to be entering grad school this year, if I'm not mistaken, and we're only 19. It's either this year or next year. Now imagine if he had been in a proper environment and skipped the underachievement phase. The sky's the limit. Many of the others I know at this level were/are depressed, especially the girls. Women have more pressure to conform, both genetically and socially. These gals often suppress their talent and it's not a healthy practice. Anxiety, depression, etc. are all prevalent in these populations from what I've seen. My mom had terrible anxiety and so did her brother. It took years for my mom to get over it and her brother never did. Their IQs are 150 and 160 to 170 respectively. And while my mom liked school because of the stimulation as compared to their working class home lives, my uncle hated it. They were even lucky enough to go to a high school with a minimum IQ of 120. My uncle drinks a lot now, still managed to get a six-figure job and retire in his 50s with his potential and never married. Developmentally appropriate education is so important, and with it the myths about gifted people being neurotic would go away. I've been diagnosed with ADHD and bipolar, both of which I'm quite sure I don't have now. We aren't naturally that way. It's because of the environments we've been subjected to that shape us so negatively. If less than optimal conditions exist perennially, then the gift really turns into a curse. There's, it's kind of, as Thomas West would say, a topological problem. There's just no fit in school for people who either north or south, east or west on the bell curve from the middle. The farther you go to the tails, the less school is going to fit. And since everyone, even if they do have an average IQ, many people have different strengths and weaknesses, right? So someone could have an average IQ, but in reality, they have one area that's quite well developed and others that are just lacking. And so developmentally appropriate, even the average people aren't getting developmentally appropriate education because they do also have, oftentimes disparity between their talents. And, one talent might be, the kid who's really good in math, he's not getting accelerated. He's still a grade level. He's getting a high A in that class, and maybe he's getting Bs in the other classes. And that would be expected, but he should be accelerated in that class. Even if his full scale IQ isn't even gifted, that person deserves to be able to have this personalized system that's based off of their intellectual capacity, not only full scale, but for their niche areas that they're quite good at, or and bad at, to supplement this.
Yeah.
So.
Developmental appropriateness. Obviously,
when someone's globally gifted, then real problems start to arise in school. I read this book by Mirka M. Gross, or I read, I guess, I don't know if it was a book. It seemed maybe it was an abbreviated version text because there was only like 32 pages. But it was basically exceptionally to profoundly gifted kids, and it was their stories. I think most of them were Australian. And there were reports of each kid, and they talk about their time through school. And a lot of them had problems. And what was it would be easy for the layman to look at that and be like, well, gifted people, and just be like, oh, gifted people are neurotic. Let me just ascribe some pathology to them. But in reality, when I looked at the stories, there were negative ones, but then there was one boy. So this was the smartest kid in the group. He had scored 220 on the LM. He was the most well-adjusted. He was well-liked. All wonderful things about him, but he was accelerated a lot. And he, I'm gonna pull it up. I think it's really good text. Let me see. Thanks. One sec. Yeah. Gross. Okay. Let's see.
Yeah,
okay.
You got to do the acceleration, or at least you got to do something in order to ensure developmentally appropriate education. Otherwise, you're going to be given the bodybuilder 1 pound weights to lift.
Exactly. Let me see. So I have to go to Google Scholar first.
Just letting you know, the stream's going to have to end here in about another 21 minutes.
Okay. Sounds fine.
I have a consult that I need to do, but
okay.
I'm sorry that everything's going to wind up having to be cut so much shorter.
Oh, it's no worries.
So we're going to have a half-hour stream today, but then we could potentially do that again tomorrow if you're free.
Yeah. For sure. I'm just trying to find the okay, here we go. I think I found it. Okay, yes. I think I got it. So in this book they detail just little short accounts of the students and, their ability level, their IQ scores, etc., and, their time through school. Okay, so Ian, here's one. Okay, I need to read about Ian because he was really good. He was a really good case. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When Ian Baker was 1 year old, he would help his mother with the washing, counting his nappies as she dropped them into the washing machine. His reading skills developed almost as early as his numerical ability, and by age 2, he would entertain himself for hours playing music from his much-loved collection of elderly 45 RPM records and audio cassettes. He had taught himself to select his favorites by reading the labels. By 3 years, 6 months, Ian was enjoying small books, and at preschool, while he entered at age 4, he enjoyed helping the teacher by reading aloud to the rest of the class while she prepared for the next lesson. When he realized that the other children could not see the illustrations, he developed the technique of holding the book upside down so that his classmates seated around him could see the pictures and follow the story as he pointed to the words. He was a vibrant, energetic child, enthralled by new knowledge and propelled by a compulsion to learn anything he could about everything that crossed his path. Australian children enter preschool at age 4 and formal schooling at age 5, around the same age as British children and 12 months earlier than their American counterparts. By the time Ian entered school, as he was reading with keen pleasure and full comprehension E.B. White's Charlotte's Web. Difficulties arose, however, in the first few weeks. Although Sally Baker, Ian's mother, had tentatively mentioned to the reception class teacher that Ian was already an avid and fluid reader, the teacher was reluctant to believe her. The situation was complicated by the fact that Ian had long since passed through the stage of needing to sound out words and now read silently and absorbedly. His teacher, even when she did notice him reading, assumed that he was simply looking at the pictures. In consequence, she insisted that Ian work through the reading readiness exercises with the rest of the children. As for maths, which had been a joy and an obsession for Ian since he turned 4, by which age he had already mastered addition and subtraction of numbers up to 1,000, maths in the receptions class was limited to the recognition of the numbers 1 to 10. Ian, so they had mentioned another boy, Hadley, before this, who basically had similar experience. Ian and Hadley, 1,000 miles apart, had virtually identical introductions to the world of school. The first lesson the two boys learned was that the school would teach them nothing which they had not taught themselves at least 2 years previously. The second was in common with the other children in their classes. Ian in particular found the social isolation hard to take. His reading capacity, his interests in the games he wanted to play at break and lunch, the television programs he preferred, were all radically different from those of the other 5-year-olds. Before long, he was disliked, resented, and rejected by his classmates. Being a lad of spirit and furious with the school's refusal to let him learn, Ian returned the resentment in full measure. Ian had never been... This is very similar to how I was as a kid, and when I was first in school as well. Ian had never been an easy child to live with. His parents, Brock and Sally, had noticed from his early years that when he was bored or frustrated, he could become quite aggressive towards other children, especially his brother, Bill, who was 3 years younger. Ian made no secret of his extreme dislike of school, but his parents were not at first aware of the seriousness of the situation. This occurred some 8 months into the school year when the vice principal and Ian's teacher requested that the Bakers visit the school for an interview. In this meeting, Brock and Sally were informed that Ian was uncontrollable in class, that he was displaying violent bouts of alarming physical behavior towards other students, and that the school wanted to refer him to a special school for behaviorally disturbed children, attached to the psychiatric branch of a large children's hospital. As part of the referred procedure, Ian would be psychometrically assessed by the region's educational psychologist. By happy chance, the psychologist had a particular interest in gifted children and chose to test Ian on the Stanford Binet LM, rather than on a test with a lower ceiling. Ian's IQ was assessed at least 170, and tests of reading achievement established that he had the reading and comprehension skills of a 12-year-old. The psychologist explained to the staff at Ian's school that he was not behaviorally disturbed. His hostility and aggression arose out of his desperate loneliness, bewilderment, and intellectual frustration. Ian's progress through school is described in depth in Chapter 8, as will be told. His first few years of schooling were a saga of educational misjudgment. Despite his tested abilities and achievement, he was required to work in lockstep progression with age peers through the curriculum of the grade in which he was enrolled. At the age of 9 years 11 months, for the purpose of the present study, Ian took the Scholastic Aptitude Test in Mathematics, as a standardized test of maths achievement taken by American 17 and 18-year-olds wishing to enter university. The average score varies from year to year, but is usually around 500. Ian, 7 years younger than the students for whom the test is designed, made the remarkable score of 560. Despite this, his teacher insisted that he undertake the grade 4 maths curriculum with the other 9-year-olds. During his grade 4 years, you were going to say something.
Nope, I wasn't. I'm just thinking.
Oh, okay. During his grade 4 year, Brock and Sally decided to have Ian's cognitive abilities reassessed. Accordingly, at the age of 9 years 3 months, Ian was assessed firstly on the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, and subsequently on the Stanford-Binet, the scale on which he had first been tested at age 5. Ian ceilinged out on the WISC-R, scoring scale scores of 19 on all subscales of both verbal and performance subtests. On the Stanford-Binet, Ian, in the words of the psychologist's report, sailed through all the items through the highest level of all, Superior Adult 3. There, he did start to fail on some items, but nevertheless, his IQ came off the top of this scale also. Ian scored a mental age of 18 years 6 months, exactly twice his chronicle age, and thus a ratio IQ of 200. In addition, the psychologist administered standardized achievement testing of reading and spelling. In both, Ian scored at the adult level. Children scoring at IQ 180 or above appear in the population at a ratio of fewer than 1 in 1 million. Requiring Ian to undertake all his schoolwork with aged peers of average ability was rather like requiring a child of average intelligence to spend 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, interacting solely with children who were profoundly intellectually handicapped. The psychologist was appalled to hear that a child of such exceptional talent was being required to plow through a lockstep curriculum with other grade 4 students. She expressed her concern strongly in her written report. I was somewhat concerned to hear from Ian and his parents that he had been doing grade 4 math along with his classmates. We clearly have a boy who has extreme talent in the maths area. I would strongly suggest that Ian most clearly needs acceleration in his math program. He is likely to become quite bored and frustrated by maths at his own age, and it seems to be a real waste of true talent. Over the years, Ian's parents and teachers have had occasional bouts of difficult behavior from Ian. He certainly is not a subtle sort of child. His parents have found, as is true with many other gifted and talented children, that when Ian becomes bored and does not have his fix of intellectual activity, it is then that the difficult behavior begins. It is important to remember that his behavior only deteriorates to unacceptable levels when he is signaling that he is bored and not getting the intellectual stimulation he needs by legitimate means. It needs to be remembered that for Ian to be intellectually stimulated, the activities presented to him need to be of a particularly high level. He certainly will not be challenged by the types of problems and puzzles which generally interest children of his age. Certainly, working with the Binet, he could dismiss such questions without a second thought, and they obviously hold no interest for him, nor any satisfaction when he has solved them. In response to Brock and Sally's pleading that Ian be given some sort of extension or enrichment work to keep his mind alive, the school principal stated frankly that it would be political suicide for her to establish any differentiated program for the intellectually gifted students in her school. 2 years later, a letter from Sally to the Director General of Education of the state drew the response that all children have gifts and talents, and that a policy which treats gifted and talented children as a discrete group is likely to be rigid and divisive in its application. So yeah, I mean, so let's contrast that. So this kid, obviously being aggressive, acting out, school shit, quite obviously. I mean, it said it all. And I need to go to, let's see, command. Okay. Here's Adrian. Let's contrast this. Adrian Steng, age 16, is the eldest of 3 boys. His brothers Colin and Edmund are age 14 and 13 respectively. All 3 boys are remarkably gifted. At the age of 9 years, 7 months, Edmund scored a mental age of 17 years, 5 months on the Slosum intelligence test, a ratio IQ of 182. Adrian is a pleasant, well-adjusted, good-humored young man whose modesty, good nature, and cheerful personality have won him a wide circle of friends. Adrian, whose parents are Chinese, born and educated in Hong Kong, is the most profoundly gifted of the 40 children in the study. He taught himself to read before the age of 2, and by 3 he had reading, writing, and mathematical abilities of a 6-year-old. At age 3.5, he could multiply 2-digit numbers by 2-digit numbers in his head. By 5, the usual age for school entry in his state, he had completed and home studied the first 6 years of the elementary school's math curriculum. At age 6 years, he was assessed on the Stanford Binet and was found to have a mental age of 14, a ratio IQ of more than 220. Adrian's parents were fortunate in finding schools whose staffs were insightful enough and flexible enough to provide for this profoundly gifted young boy a radically different educational program. The elementary and high schools worked together to design a program of concurrent enrollment incorporating both grade skipping and subject acceleration combined with curriculum compacting and enrichment. Adrian's special program has satisfied his intellectual, social, and emotional needs. He is the only child of the 15 who believes that he has been permitted to work at school at the level of which he is capable. When he completed his elementary education, he attended high school for some subjects, university for others. His program is described in depth in later chapters. Suffice it to say that Adrian took the SAT math at 8 years old and made the phenomenal score of 760. He gained his Bachelor of Science degree shortly after his 15th birthday. Alice so then was the next person. But as you can see, like this person, wonderful adjustment. And like stark difference. And you would think, I mean, this is the most gifted of that group. You'd think he would be the one with the worst problems, right? But with a school that he became literally with a wide circle for like well-adjusted, like normal kid. And it's very stark contrast with Ian, who, became violent and stuff. And in my experience with school was similar, where I started acting out all the way. My parents had to threaten me to not see my friends, for me to stop misbehaving. Basically, I didn't care what the teacher said. I don't know. I remember in kindergarten. Okay, so I was, again, 98th percentile oppositional, very, very strong-headed. I have to understand what's going on and why things are happening, and there has to be a reason behind them for me to really follow. Arbitrary rules just didn't sit with me. I was like, it doesn't make sense. Why would I do that? And I was completely and I was an honest kid as well. So, for example, I was acting out in class and laughing at something a lot. Like something me and this other kid, and this kid, he's not really a smart kid at all, but we were goofy. Like we were doing real just goofy things, like doing some imagination, like pretending to be something or acting out. Like I loved, just humor and stuff. So, I was making this kid laugh and we were just being, really kind of disruptive and kind of goofy. And the teacher, she was mad and I wasn't listening. She was telling me to stop and I probably wasn't hearing her half the time. And the other half I was like, and then I, just wasn't heeding her advice. And then she, so she called me out in the class and started, scolding me and this kid. And I was still laughing because the stuff that was funny to me, like I couldn't really stop laughing at like this behavior of ours. And then she's like, "Do you think this is funny?" And I was like, "Yes." And I got sent to the principal's office. Let's see. And stuff like that happened, numerous times. I did not heed authorities' advice. I just didn't really listen to them. And I wasn't like, I was not like really aggressive towards other kids, but I was a rough kid. And I actually got along pretty well with other kids. I was pretty social. I had been socialized really well as a kid, and I loved being goofy. And emotionally, like other kids like being goofy too. So I was just like, I was constantly just kind of a goofy kid. I didn't really engage in intellectual discussion with my classmates. And so some of them were annoyed by me and some thought I was quite funny. And essentially, my main qualms were with the teachers, the authority. That's where the friction really was quite apparent. I mean, I don't know. I was reading emails my mom had sent me, and it's basically me like not listening to anything the teachers are saying at all. Really, like they're like, yeah, completely unresponsive. Like, and then showing I showed no remorse because they want to make the kid feel bad for not complying. And that's literally not going to work at all with me. I don't care that I didn't comply. If I did something mean to someone, I would feel bad. If I hurt someone in some way, I would feel bad. If I did something I saw as morally wrong or unjust, that would, rip me apart. But me breaking some stupid rule, I just didn't care at all. Like I was not remorseful. And the teachers were worried. They were like, why is this, he just seems, the problem child, quote unquote. And it stemmed out of boredom. A lot of the reports said that, when Stevens finds work to be too easy or boring, he checks out and does it carelessly or doesn't do it at all. I read through so many emails and little reports because my mom had sent them to me today. And, it's this common theme. Simply not being in the right educational environment, maybe it was not functional. And in high school, it even got worse. I'd say I just really checked out. And by high school age, when, kids basically by high school age mostly learn not to act out against teachers or not to challenge authority. It's usually in elementary school where you see these behaviors sort of arising because the kids haven't really learned. But by high school, that sort of stuff has usually been ironed out, and most kids in your classes are going to be super compliant, and you don't see real much kids getting in trouble. But I was still, either taunting my teachers in some way. I mean, I was pretty rude, to be honest. Either taunting my teachers in some way, whether that taking control over the class, distracting people, and then, testing the teacher's limits and realizing that their limits, that I could easily exceed their limits and they weren't going to do anything about it, or, just kind of, shouting out answers as soon as they write the question on the board and stuff like that. Just really, just kind of rude stuff, because I was still frustrated. And it was something to do. And then the rest of the time I was on my phone or asleep on my desk. And it just was not a good experience. I learned very little, and it just feels like you're sitting there and just doing nothing. It's terrible. And on the other hand, when I learn things at my own pace and when I get to discuss about them with other people, it's extremely fulfilling. None of these things occur. Mm-hmm. And my mood is way better. I'm just a much happier, healthier person because of that. And especially, with finding, people in my peer group to talk to, that as well, whether through online, like this, or, I have this friend at college who we talk, and he has all the overexcitabilities. It's so funny. He just gets so revved up, and so he gets so excited that because and I am too. We'll have interesting conversation, and it's just so engaging, and my mood gets so much better, and I'm happy, I'm energetic, I'm just tapping my foot all over, and it's just wonderful. It's really fulfilling. And when you're mainstreamed and kept at grade level, and that's not where you should be intellectually, those opportunities are. I was so lucky that in my college town there's a college, and it's extremely bimodal. So there's my best friend and growing up in kindergarten through through 5th grade, he was EG. He got a 25 on the ACT when he was in 7th grade, and he's got a 160 IQ. So I did have some peers, and that did say if I had no one like that in elementary, I think I would have been more like Ian. And that that's not good. And what the worst thing about these stories, I think anyone would agree that this is bad, but is that the school is unwilling, they are unwilling to accept this obvious, psychologists are, hey, look, that you're stifling this kid, and then the letter that's, oh, everyone has gifts and talents, your kid is not special. That's just shit, right? That's garbage. And that, that pisses me off. And it's just wrong. So I don't know. That's kind of my harangue is over, but yeah,
all right. It is definitely wrong to do that. But then also, to end on a positive note,
Oh yeah.
To end on a positive note, giving developmentally appropriate education to students can, whatever amount of defiance, it can certainly ameliorate the situation. It's not going to necessarily get rid of all of it, because still you're going to wind up, still you're going to wind up. I mean, people are people, but ultimately respecting their autonomy, respecting their needs, and getting them what, acting in accordance with that. It goes a long way for people that are gifted, for people that have average intelligence, for pretty much everybody. I think it's called treating people like human beings.
Oh yeah, there you go. Just
wow.
You accommodate their differences.
Wow.
And you I think one of the problems.
Write that down. Take notes.
I already forgot it. No. One of the problems is,
last thing from you, and I want to have to go and do a consult.
Yep. Okay. One of the problems is kind of this notion, like, treat everyone equally. It means you treat everyone as a human and with respect for them. Yes, it doesn't mean treat them as if they are the same person, because they definitively aren't.
Same dignity. Perhaps difference in other areas. The same dignity.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
Thank you, Stephen, for joining in. We'll be doing this again tomorrow at a more usual time. Yeah. See you guys.